Well, morning everybody. It's the 13th of May 2020 and just got a few thoughts here today and a discussion on options for railways in Australia and ideas, let's say, and I'll be talking about several things. Here is, it's actually my photography. It was from a movie I made of the launch of the first Spirit of Queensland from Brisbane to Cairns back in 2013. And this is a rail bed. It's interesting that on this shot here, there's one rail bed made up as a nighttime and one beside it in daytime configuration. Now, I initially poo-hooed the rail beds but I thought, well, they have lack of security and lack of privacy that you'd get in a sleeping car, and I stand by that. But the use of them could be that a train would go one way by day and then turn around and come back by night with the rail beds in operation, and during the day that would become a first-class 2-in-1 seating with it'd have the entertainment and so on. Everyone has a headset, everyone has a TV screen, they can watch movies or television, or they can listen to albums of music, or they can listen to comedy and do what they want. Now, of course, I wouldn't use that during the day, but just as at night time. And then of course, they would make the rail beds up and into nighttime configuration, and people would, travel all night, and then make them up again in the morning and provide breakfast and so forth. Now, there are numerous routes that this idea can be used on. One I have in mind is when they finish the dual gauging between Geelong and Ballarat and Maryborough, they'll be able to operate a standard gauge Melbourne to Mildura train. Now, it could go up by day and come back by night, and vice versa. So you'd have a twice a day service. Now, to be realistic, I think that VIEWLINER won't do any of that. I think they'll operate a standard gauge velocity style train with a buffet in it, and that's all we'll probably get. But anyway, there are numerous places. It's just ideas here. This one goes Brisbane to Cairns, but there would be options around the country for use of this type of rail facility. And what it is really an adoption of first-class airline seats that are used occasionally. Some of the airlines have this type of idea. So anyway, just a thought, and I want to discuss also a type of sleeping car that I would really like to see introduced in the country. Another option I'd like to see adopted is this VIEWLINER sleeper, and this is what they call a roomette. It's actually for one passenger or for two, and you'll notice another row of windows up top, and the reason for that is when the upper bed is made up, a person can be in that bunk and see out. Open the blinds and look out at the countryside, and you've got the two beds or two seats in the daytime use there, and you've got the toilet, and you have wash basin and wardrobes and those sort of facilities. Now, on a Queensland rail situation, you would have easily 7 rooms down each side, which is 28 passengers total. Now, that is way above the rail bed capacity at present. And that's not an exaggeration to say 7 each side, because they could easily fit 8. But if you considered having a toilet, extra, maybe, I don't think there's any real need for showers, but you could have something like that for disabled people, maybe a wide toilet and a shower and so on, to accommodate that sort of thing. And you could have some alterations to the design, but you get the general idea. And also, it's not impossible to build this type of configuration in a multiple unit train, in other words a DMU, let us assume that it would be a non-powered car for a sleeper. But anyway, the ideas are there, and they could just literally run, as I've been talking about the rail beds earlier, they could run by day, all day to a destination and come back overnight and vice versa, and sell those seats as first class. It's just an idea, guys, so I thought I'd put it to you anyway, and it's well within a possibility to build that type of thing in Australia. Well, I'd like to get on to a few general transport concerns or issues, and a couple of ideas and so on that I've been discussing briefly. The first thing is, well, we've got this COVID-19. Now, that's going to cause a lot of trouble for a while with our transport systems, and it is causing it. We've got Qantas, for example, operating on 5% of its all-normal capacity in flights, and 1% internationally. In other words, the 1% is charters. But if they start overcoming that in the next few months, and I hope sincerely that they do, of course. Air travel is a major portion of our means of getting around in Australia and the world, actually. But I've said a number of times that I've felt that rail travel could have a resurgence, and I mean it. And I find it interesting, almost dumbfounding in some respects, that otherwise very, very well written letters to the Railway Digest magazine, for example, talks about high-speed rail, Sydney to Melbourne, which is great. I am totally in favour of it. But having it go through both the airports, in other words, start out of the city, go to the airport, go down, make 2 or 3 stops on the way to Melbourne. You know, you'd take Canberra, Wagga, Albury, Shepparton, Melbourne, via the airport. I don't think they realise that. In fact, even my own family and friends they're dismayed at what I say about this subject. Let's say we're heading closer and closer to a major war, and I see China's rattling. You know, it's rattling the sabers, shall we say, and America is getting a bit tired of them as well, and trade, and America owes trillions of dollars to China, while China's going to try and hold that over the heads of the United States, and they're bullying their way in through Asia, and even in the Pacific and so on. So I'm not going to get onto that subject per se, other than talking about the transport area, and that is, if there is a major war, apart from the many changes, and some of which I've outlined in previous videos, what can we expect in life in Australia, if we are isolated and don't have international travel, and we have to look after ourselves, as it were, I would see a moderate high speed, an improvement to the rail system, being completely realistic. You're looking at cruising speeds of 150 to 200 kilometres an hour being very viable between Sydney and Melbourne, and instead of taking 10 or 12 hours, 10 hours or whatever it is that they take, you're looking at maybe 5 hours, 6 hours, or something of that nature at the most. That's not huge. That's not fantastic by world standards, but you could see a number of trains operating between. It'd be diesel operated. They're not going to electrify the system for the time being, but you could see fairly high speed, or called moderate high speed, and you could see amenities and comfort and just general improvement on the system between Sydney and Melbourne, and the city of Brisbane's more difficult because it's very hilly, windy track and all the rest of it. You need a lot of deviations. Sydney, Melbourne, you need only very few deviations to improve the situation. I'm not going to go long-winded and boring into all of that. But I see these improvements, and I see now, looking more realistically at what I expect to happen with the standard gauge version of the Velocity. Those who are familiar with it, the Velocity trains are quite successful. In Victoria, they're relative high speed. I mean, they do 160 kilometres an hour, which is like 100 miles an hour for my American and British friends, but only for short, relatively short sectors. It's like our tilt train in Queensland doing 160 over some reasonably long stretches here and there on that trip to Rockhampton, but I'm talking in terms of it being very, very consistent on the Sydney-Melbourne. I would think with the Velocity, standard gauge Velocity running Melbourne to Albury, it wouldn't be a 3-car train, it'd probably at least be a 4-car train, and probably have, it will have a buffet in it. Now, a similar train set could be used from Melbourne to Adelaide twice a day, and my concept of I'm just getting ruined here. I asked people to stay away. I asked them to stay away, and I meant it. Sorry, I'm trying to talk. Sorry about that, guys. I've got granddaughters on the hunt, let's say. I discussed the rail bed concept, and that can be done with rotating platforms, in other words, like you're rotating reclining chairs. Queensland is unique. All the seats, and therefore the rail beds, face one way. The entire train is then turned at the end of the run on a triangle, what the Americans call a Y. He goes out, comes around, turns the entire set, and they go back. And this is done with the tilt train between Brisbane and Rockhampton as well, and so on. But in the context of Sydney, Melbourne, and Melbourne, Adelaide, this can't be done very, very easily. So you have to have platforms to turn the entire rail bed round. Now, leave that to the technical people to work out whether that's feasible. But the other concept I had in mind, and I really meant this to be looked at, is a VIEWLINER sleeper. And some of my friends, well, my friends in the United States are very, very familiar with this. It's a room, they call it a roomette. Now, the old style roomettes that we know on the Indian Pacific and the Ghan and on the Spirit of the Outback between Brisbane and Longreach are for one passenger only. But the American roomettes are about the same size of a standard roomette. But they have 2 seats and therefore 2 beds, and they have a toilet, by the way, and they have your normal amenities, a wash basin and electrical outlets and the like. They're very practical. I would believe, I really do believe that they could be built into a DMU. Now, whether it's the standard DMU as we have, or whether it's an XPT style replacement train, it might be better to have a new version of that so that the passengers don't get the engine sound, especially in the sleeping car. So that's something that I'm not prepared to worry about for now or argue about or whatever else. I'm just putting these ideas up as concepts, shall I say. And the idea is, by the way, those who are not familiar with it, is that a train operating Melbourne to Adelaide, you could probably do that in about 8 hours rather than the current. It'll cut at least 2 hours off the journey. In other words, it might be currently 10 hours or something like that. So you're looking at 8 hours and maybe better, but I'm just saying certainly 8 hours. So you'd have plenty of time to go by day between Melbourne and Adelaide, have plenty of time to service it, make up the beds, as it were, and go back overnight. So you'd have genuine first class, 2-in-1 seating, becomes a rail bed and charge appropriately more for that service. And snack bar, and I'd like to see a lounge. We're not going to get the lounge, unfortunately, but I really would like to see a lounge, a snack bar lounge, like in Queensland, where they have the Spirit of Queensland, and of course the Spirit of the Outback has separate lounge and dining cars and so on. We're not really getting into that, and I'm not expecting that. I never put up what you could call a pie in the sky concept. I'm putting up what I consider to be a very viable and reasonable option, and that is a train set that operates day and night. In other words, 2 services a day, Melbourne to Adelaide, and later on Melbourne to Mildura, and I'm saying 8 hours. Well, 8 hours, probably less to Mildura, but I'm just explaining that you could certainly go up by day and come back by night, and vice versa. You could have 2 sets doing twice daily service on both of those routes. And come to think about it, the Melbourne to Albury, they might like to consider going Melbourne through to Wagga and then coming back. Wagga's a big place. So these are just thoughts, you know. People can comment on that. I welcome civil and polite comments, but look, I mean, I'm just putting these ideas up, and I'd like someone to take on board some of these things and forward them through to authorities. I'm not looking for any reward of any kind. I just, want the ideas implemented. That's my main concern. It always has been. And incidentally, I used to do transport lobby work years ago with the trade union in Sydney, and I was in that action for public transport in Sydney as well. And up here, I had a group called Citizens for Public Transport, and I had meetings with Queensland Rail Management and Department of Transport Management as well. So I have a little bit of experience in that area. But I'd like to put the ideas forward, and those who want to push it, well, very welcome to do so. And I'm not worrying about the credit, as I said. I just want the whole thing implemented, and just basically let's see it operated. Okay, so put the ideas up to you guys, and hear from you if you're interested in that. And thanks for viewing.